So leading up into this event and thinking about it, I could think of nothing I wanted more to do than to come together with the incredible Grand Canyon Youth community and just celebrate all of the different folks that make river trips happen for young people. And then the impact, tonight's theme is impact, the impact that ripples out from a Grand Canyon Youth experience. And before we get too far underway, I want to take a moment and give a land acknowledgement. Here at Grand Canyon Youth and here at the Center for the Arts, we are located on the ancestral homelands of the Havasupai, the Navajo, the Wallapai, the Hopi, the Zuni, the Western Apache, and the Southern Paiute, past and present, and we recognize with gratitude the people who have stewarded these lands since time immemorial and the vibrant Native communities who make their home here today. And with land acknowledgements, if you aren't backing them up with action, they don't mean very much. And so at Grand Canyon Youth, we try very hard to back our land acknowledgement up with action in as many different ways as we can. And I'm so grateful for all of the great tribal communities that we get to work with at Grand Canyon Youth and the ways that they support us. Tonight, we are welcoming 6 storytellers who have graciously offered to tell their stories tonight. These are all volunteers, sometimes begged, but not always. Sometimes enthusiastically desiring to tell their stories. And out of respect for these storytellers, take a moment and silence your phone. And then put yourself in their shoes. At Grand Canyon Youth, one of our values is curiosity. And so if you think for a minute about what it might feel like to be a storyteller, telling a story in front of a community of your peers, show up for them in the way that you would love for them to show up for you if you were up here. The theme of tonight's event is impact. And you may remember back in this space, for a lot of years, we used to do films. And it was really fun, we loved it, and it was great. And we switched a few years ago to stories. And so why stories? And one of the things that we love at Grand Canyon Youth is that we provide opportunities, not really just for the youth participants, but for the guides and the other adults on the expedition to get away from the noise of the day-to-day, away from our phones and the media. And one of my favorite things to do is to be on a river trip and both tell stories, but also hear the stories of the people on the trips. And sometimes those stories are reflecting what happened before. Sometimes it was something that just happened that day. There is real power in story, and I don't know if we spend enough time face-to-face sharing stories. If you didn't know, tonight's event is a fundraiser. What? We have a $40,000 fundraising goal tonight, and I checked like 5 minutes ago, and we were like $800 away from our goal. And that doesn't mean that you don't still, if you want to donate or you feel moved to donate, please still donate. A goal is kind of an arbitrary number. And all of that funding goes towards making Grand Canyon Youth programs as affordable to as many different participants as possible. And there are a few ways that you can support us tonight. If you have not yet checked out our auction, we have close to 200 items generously donated by people in Flagstaff and from outside of Flagstaff. And it is open until noon tomorrow. And if there's nothing, that meets your fancy in the auction, you can just make a donation. That would be great. If you have any questions about technology or like how do I do the online auction, et cetera, do not ask me. If you work with me, will know that technology is not my strong suit. We have Haley Nelson in the foyer there at the merchandise table, and she is way better at it than I am, so you could ask her for some help. And before we got started tonight, and in thinking about, as the weather starts to change and it gets a little cold, we're like, how do we help transport people to the river? And there is a film that was made in 2014, so that's been a minute. I look a lot younger in this film. And we wanted to share the film with you this evening as a way to kind of get us in the mindset and kind of remember what a river trip is like. And it's a short film, but it's called What You Take Away.
I find myself thinking about it almost every day. I am so incredibly lucky to have experienced this. It's definitely changed a lot of how I think and how I act. I'm 17 and I'm in high school, so, the obvious questions that are on my mind is, what school do I want to go to? What do I want to study? What am I going to be doing for the rest of my life? It's a little bit daunting. You don't exactly know what you want to do or how you want to do it, and exactly what life holds in the cards for you. I mean, sure, it'd be cool if you knew exactly what you're going to do, but then where's the adventure in that? And I'm just kind of waiting to see what's going to happen and then how you're going to react to it. Because that's really all you can control, is how you're going to navigate things. Going down a river is kind of like an allegory for life. Like you don't know what's around that next bend. You don't know what's going to happen. All you can control is how you're reacting with everything. When you first start in the Grand Canyon, you're kind of overwhelmed by just the natural beauty and just being completely immersed in this immense thing.
It's just getting kids out of their comfort zone and exposing them to new experiences and new people. And it's that magic that happens on a trip where you become a family.
It's not for at-risk youth, it's not for wealthy youth, it's for any youth, because any youth can benefit from a river trip. That's the goal, is how do we inspire curiosity about the place and about each other.
But we're just trying to see what's out here. I'm standing on this rock, I'm scraping the sand and algae off, and just the current's taking it into this net.
What are the little wormy swimming things again?
The question was asked when we first started doing this about 10 years ago, can kids do quality data collection that is useful to scientists?
Did anybody get any black flies?
Yeah, we did.
You did? Sweet.
And they've got the special opportunity to take part in science in this new place that they're discovering.
Oh, look at that. Oh, that's awesome, yeah.
This kind of made me realize that everything depends on really little things, like tiny little bugs can control the whole fish population of a river.
You start to ask questions about one thing. How is that connected to another insect? How is that connected to the birds or the fish or the bats?
It's an exposure to science in a positive way. And those opportunities are more and more rare for our youth. And not that every kid on this trip is going to go out there and be a scientist, but every kid on one of these trips is going to have a sense of awareness of the place and what's here and what goes on here, and they're going to take that with them.
GCY is really helping kids truly understand how exactly all of this works and what we can do to help it. It kind of boosts your confidence to go around in your own community and kind of figure out what you can do to help things there. Being on the GCY trip just kind of created this awareness for me from like where our water comes from. The Colorado River, the water gets pumped, you know, all over the country to feed a lot of different communities. And I have this giant reservoir in my backyard, so where does that water go? Then how am I using it? So I think that sort of sense of adventure kind of made me want to discover it, made me want to learn more about the world that I live in. And I think I'm a lot more conscious now because of it. When I see a river, I don't just see water. I see an entire ecosystem. Once you kind of gain that knowledge that whatever water you're using, you know, in your community is water that's not going into that ecosystem, I become a lot more conscious of how I'm using water. So just how amazing.
I think that movie aged pretty well. It's great to look and see the participants in there, and I know of 2 that have PhDs now. Katie, the main person, reached out and is hoping to be a trip coordinator this next year. So, you know, Grand Canyon Youth, once you're part of the community, always part of the community. We would love to take a moment to thank our amazing sponsors. Thank you to all our sponsors for tonight's event. We've got Arizona Raft Adventures, Narva Institute, Mo River Works, formerly Mo Kobe, R&A Import Auto, Wildland Trucking Company, Artisan Metalworks, Flagstaff Surgical Associates, National Bank of Arizona, Fratelli Pizza, and Parched Non-Alcoholic Cocktails. Let's give them a big Really, with this sponsorship, it allows us to come together and have a celebration, and so really grateful for those sponsors. Okay, who's ready for a story, for the first story? I am pleased to introduce 2 of my favorite people in the world, actually, Emily and Mark Manoni. And Emily came to Flagstaff from New York to study at NAU. Her introduction to the river was a cold November trip on the mighty San Juan, and she has been a guide for GCY on and off for the past 20 years. Mark has come to Flagstaff from Milwaukee, Wisconsin to study at NAU as well, and he worked at Grand Canyon surveying sandbars for GCMRC for more than 16 years and was on a GCY trip where we had some interesting run-ins with a pelican, but that's a story for a different night. Their story is titled An Origin Story, Unanticipated Consequences and Impact. Emily and Mark Manoni.
Yeah, I ran grapevine with a pelican on my silver box. I'll tell that later.
Good evening, everyone. Those of you that have been to our house, you've heard this story. So I'm just going to pretend that we are all standing in our kitchen and we're going to share this story with you. We hope you like it.
And we sure have heard this story over and over through the years, too, told in different ways. And it might be more entertaining than what we're doing now, because I think some of those things, the facts have changed in that. But we're going to do our best to tell the true story from the beginning, which starts really over 30 years and goes all the way up until about last week. It's crazy, you guys standing in front of you all and seeing the people in this audience, because so many of you have known us, or at least me, for before that, over 30 years. And it's really special to be able to stand here and talk about this. And this story starts where all great river stories pretty much start, right? At Macy's.
I was 19.
Yeah.
And I was a barista. And Mark, if you don't know this, has a twin brother, Matt. And they both used to come in, and I definitely would mistake them sometimes. Like, oh, you grew a beard. Oh, you have glasses now.
And Emily certainly stood out. 5'1", 100 pounds, with 4-foot dreadlocks down to about her ankles when we first met.
That was a different time.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't know about cultural appropriation. Sorry.
Yeah. And it was time for me to start a job. I finished my undergraduate degree at NAU and did what most people do after they finish their undergraduate degree and went on tour of the Grateful Dead for the summer. And And that was over, it was time to get a job, and what do? You go to Macy's. And I met a fishery biologist named Bill Lightfried, who some of you might know, who said, there's a guy up in the bank building down there hiring someone to do GIS on some sandbar work. And I went there and was hired. $5.50 an hour, remember that? And I was hoping to do it just to get in to do at least just one river trip. And that was in 1992.
So fast forward a few years, I finished my degree at NAU. I have no idea what I'm doing with my life, so I thought I would be a bartender at Mogollon. Maybe some of you remember this place. Really complicated, there were 5 beers. That was all I had to do, was pick one of them and pour it. And I had just started getting into river running a little bit. Mark and I actually, we were friends through Macy's. And we got to do a science trip together. So that video that you were just watching where they were picking bugs, my roommate used to do some of that science with Joe Shannon through GCMRC. And I got to go volunteer on a trip, and on one of those trips, Mark was the boatman. So we've done a river trip together before. So there I am, working at Mogollon. I don't know what to do with my life. I just know I need to go back in Grand Canyon. And in comes Mark for lunch one day. And so I approach him and his group and ask if I can maybe come be a volunteer on one of their science trips.
Yeah, and that was real sweet because my introduction to Grand Canyon was to be working in Grand Canyon, and all those cameras that you guys see once in a while when you're down there or have seen that take pictures every day of beaches, was to be the person to go down and change the film in those cameras. What a cool job, right? That means you get to do like 9 or 10 river trips a year. And I know when I first jumped in, more important than anything else to me about the science, the work, and everything I was doing in Grand Canyon was rowing the boat. And so all I really wanted to do was row, and did as much as I could on those trips. And what was nice was I was able to get thrown onto some of these other trips, like I got to do with Emily, which was one of those Joe Shannon veg trips. And she wasn't going unnoticed. You know, there was a point early on in our life that I thought I might have a chance. I don't know, but
don't listen to
you know, when you're running your boat alone every day, and I would be like, hey, Arts and Crafts Day, we're making split twig figurines over here. Let's make a rack of monkey fists, you know, or whatever. Nothing, got nothing. Never once did she run on my boat, ever. But we did maintain friendship, which was good. And prior to, this was 1998, prior to an October survey trip, I was working by that time with the Grand Canyon NAMDORs, which if you were here last year, you got to hear Shannon tell a beautiful, perfect, wonderful story about some of the work that's done there. And we were going in to get ready to do a trip. And back then, there were no contract boatmen. A lot of times the scientists ran the boat, 4 boats, 10 people, and we were planning our trip. And those of us leading the trip went to Mogollon. Now, Mogollon, we weren't going to like lunch on like drinking beer or anything. We were going in, we were just going, because back then they served like sausages and stuff like that from some.
It was just for sandwiches and sodas.
But Emily was waiting on us. And we sit down at the task at hand, we're looking at the 43 sites that we have to survey and the crews that we're gonna bring, and we're like, we need a cook. And that was right when Emily had come over and been like, hey guys.
I like cooking.
Yeah.
So they invite me to be the cook, and I love food so much. Like, I just planned the most elaborate, complex, unnecessary menu that you can imagine.
Pre-making all the red chili
Oh, I
sauce.
did. I pre-made the chilies, and you know, I had all these nice planned. And so we go to do the shop, and this is when I learned, walking up and down the aisles of Smith's at the time, how important mustard is
For the names.
to the names. We spent a lot of time in the mustard aisle, right? So we have to get every flavor, multiple numbers of any kind of mustard that there is. So, okay, we're packed, we go on the river. And there we are, day 2, really the first full morning, and the NAMs have the tradition of having breakfast and then immediately making lunch because everybody goes out and does science all day, so you need to take your lunch with you. All right, so I'm the cook, you know, and I'm getting breakfast ready, and where's the mustard? I don't know. All the mustard is gone, the great mustard debacle, right? And so I'm standing in the kitchen completely defeated. Mark comes in the kitchen, like, concerned, because he's the guy that vouched for me, and he's like, where's the mustard? I don't know where the mustard is. And so Mark, in his very kind and helpful way, was like, how about I make breakfast? That was our first fight. So now we're not talking, not speaking, not looking at each other. Same morning, we found the mustard, by the way. And there we are in the Groover line.
Yeah, we end up in the Groover line.
Trying not to
looking
make
at our
eye
feet,
contact.
Not making eye contact.
Because I'm mad.
Yeah. Where all great river controversies get settled in the Groover.
Yeah.
And
I'm pretty sure he goes, I'm sorry. And I was like, yeah, I'm sorry. And then we hugged, and then we were friends, and it was, again, purely platonic, and down the river we go. And most of this trip, I was riding with one of the other boatmen. It was his first time running a boat, so I'm there for, like, you know, moral support and courage as the days roll on and unfold.
yeah, it's a pretty magic trip. I mean, October, non-motor season, going down, saving Grand Canyon from the sand with your closest friends, 10 people, 4 boats, cruising along. You know, the one thing for me is when you're a surveyor in Grand Canyon, you survey on one side of the beach, and then the people running rod and collecting the points are on the other side. So you spend a lot of time alone. And I spent pretty much that whole trip alone. It was a small trip and was never interested in coming on my boat, which is fine, you know. When we call it lighthousing. I don't know if you guys want to know a good little tidbit. The NAMS came up with lighthousing it. If you might have heard of a boatman, famous boatman, Ken Grua, the Factor. He was also a wonderful guitar player, and one of his songs was every man must be a lighthouse, for he must stand alone. And one thing about surveying in Grand Canyon is we treat everybody with an equal lack of respect. So when somebody exposes themselves in a way that shows a vulnerability in the most wonderful way, we just exploit it like crazy. So I was lighthousing the canyon, you know, and then you end up hearing that. But I spent the whole trip pretty much alone on a boat. And that's all cool, and that's all fine, and then you get to Lava Falls. Lava Falls. It was a little overcast, it was a little, you know.
Late in the day.
A little late in the day, and, you know, here I am, I'm about year 6 in the canyon, lot of confidence, feeling pretty good, doing a lot of hiking and take a boat, then hike out to the back of the ferry and do another boat kind of a thing, and feeling pretty strong, 29 years old or so. But we go up on the Scout, and back then we were doing left runs. Yeah, we were doing left runs. And it's time to run Lava Falls, and I'm still lighthousing it, and all of a sudden it's like, well, I don't know, maybe I should have a passenger.
And so you asked me specifically.
I asked you specifically.
You looked at me and said, I'd like you to ride on my boat. And I was like, oh, okay, like, you know, I'll moral support for you, moral support for another person, doesn't matter to me. So I jump on the boat and I'm good to go. And we push off, you know, and I do all my tasks and coil the bow line, and I'm down like in the bilge, right? And I'm just ready to take it.
We float back from the Scout at Lava Falls. What could possibly go wrong?
And I mean, this guy's experienced, right? I'm not worried about anything. I'm ready to just take a ride.
Yeah.
And we go in, and we hit that second wave, and I'm swimming in the bilge. And I come up, and I wear contacts, right? And that's like the worst, because I can't see anything, and I'm like sputtering, and I'm wiping, and I turn around to be like, that was huge! And I just see the sticks. And I was like, I don't really know. I'm not a very experienced boater or anything, but I know I ain't taking the rest of this sideways. So I clamber back there and I jump behind the oars and I start squaring up, and I took one quick look. I mean, time was standing still, really, right? And I look back up into the rapid and I just think, he's gone. And then I turn around and square up because I'm like, I'm not taking this sideways. And I hear, I'm right here,
So my experience was a little different. You know, pulling away, definitely feeling strong. Lava, you know, and here it is, finally. I mean, we've done 2 full trips. Finally, Emily's on my boat. I'm stoked. I am gonna slick this thing so clean, you don't even know. And it is crazy to this day, and I remember it so clearly, but to enter that thing and hit that second wave, and it happened so fast and just whoof, I was gone. I mean, if you've been in that situation, it's not, I'd never been there before, I haven't again, and I never want to get there, but oh my goodness, it was a blink of the eye. I was swept out to the left of the boat, and I remember thinking, what the is going on? And before I know it, I'm under the boat, and I feel rubber on this side, and a rock on this side. So, there was a chumble. You know the rapid pretty well. It's like, oh, over the chumble, and I'm going, and I'm under the boat. And I'm thinking, yeah, I mean, this is...
You miraculously held onto a strap.
This is where it ends. I mean, it's like, I think I might be done here. There's no real getting out. But, in those, there's always that moment of, I guess, and always that one time there's a moment of clarity, like, get the heck out of here as quick as you can. Kind of went a little bit crazy to get out. And luckily, I came up right at the back of the boat. And so right at the back kick, and I was able to reach up and grab the stern line and go with the wave and then come up and just get my head over. Remember, I'm like, I'm right here. Second, I'll be back in a second. But then everything you kick, and I just launched myself over the kick and just dumped myself right back into the boat to see.
Well, you came in and you're like, all right, I got it, get out of the way. And I was like, no. I'm throwing lava now. This is how this is going.
And it would prove to what would truly be a metaphor for the rest of our life, which is, here I am, kind of a blink, blink, blink show, and come up and, am riding the boat and taking us downstream and taking us to safety. And it was really cool because you're able to make that left. We went over to the left and chalked off, for those of you who are familiar with that area, chalked off to the hot spring. I bailed the entire boat out.
Because I was throwing lava. So we get over to the spring, and Mark looks at me and he's like, Em, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I could have hurt you or you could have died. And I was like, I thought you did die. So we have this moment where we lock eyes, and this real near-death experience is what it really felt like.
Yeah, and after bailing the boat and standing on the silver boxes, I remember looking and saying, I'm just so sorry to put you in that position, and I'll never do it again. And we hugged for a long time, and then it hit me, wait, all I had to do is fall out of a boat to get her attention? I mean, all that, split twig figurines, making monkey fist, I was really trying, and it was like, no, just almost die. Boy, that was kind of a twisted way to your heart, wasn't it?
Our lives changed forever that day. And we looked across and saw our friends safely ashore and calling us downstream to celebrate that we all survived.
Yeah, we were chalked off, and the rest of the trip was off on the right there, getting ready to, get downstream and do some surveying as we had to do, but called us over, and just such a special group of people, Matt Kaplinski, Joe Hazel, Paul Umhofer, people who, Spoon, just people who mean so much to us in our life and have been with us through this. But we got to camp that night, and what happens on most good survey trips is we got a generator out and gave Mohawks. So ended up with a really bad, horrible Mohawk, and ended up,
Well, I'm cooking, and in comes this guy with the most messed up haircut I've ever seen. And I thought, oh no, I have a crush on that guy. I mean, if he doesn't jump out of the boat, fall out of the boat, our family, our beautiful, beautiful family, and our two beautiful children, they're not here. So this is the impact of this story, is that we have our family here in Flagstaff.
Yeah, and it was pretty neat. I remember that night feeling the same. I remember smoking a cigar around the fire, and Emily came and sat on my lap and just thinking, don't move, don't make her smell that cigar. She's gonna stay like this forever. And pretty much from that moment on, that evening on, we've been together ever since. And you'd think the story might just end there with, wow, they, survive lava, but like all real things in Grand Canyon, they stay in Grand Canyon. Well, they don't, we know that. So we came out, that was October 20th, 1998. So that was 26 years ago, where if I don't fall out of that boat, there was nothing going on, that's for
We're
sure.
not here. So to bring this all the way back around, we have a family tradition. I call it a river despedida. Every time one of us is leaving on the river, we go meet at Macy's and have coffee and biscuits and gravy.
Yeah, it still comes back to Macy's, right? So after the trip, we ended up having 2 kids. We've been together for 26 years since then. We have 2 kids who have grown up in this community, and I think that's a really important thing is, Emily's been working with GCY for 20 years. It's really hard to raise kids in a family around this area. We rely heavily on a lot of the people that were in this room, on this organization. Both of our kids went through GCY as participants. Both of our kids have guided for GCY. One of our kids has some handmade gear in the raffle, bid it up, nice packs, go ahead and get that. And, just going forward, it's the impact of having them now as guides and have Emily working back, it's kind of a big deal. I think, one last thing, like it all comes back to Macy's. Before any of us go on a river trip, we meet at Macy's in the morning just to kind of check in. And it was as early as last week who my daughter,
Things go full circle.
yeah, she is now a surveyor with that group that goes down in October on those survey trips. And we sit after the trip and go through survey by survey, every setup she has, who she's surveying, the Rodman, what beaches she went through, how the rapids went, and she still uses my same survey book that has my earlier surveys from 24 years before that she can compare, and she's still surveying some of the same Rodmen that I were. So from an impact standpoint, it started 30 years ago, and it's a crazy run. And it's something that Lava Falls and Grand Canyon can sure have an impact on people in their lives.
To be continued.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. And I've heard different parts of that story, but I've never heard it like in that way. So much. Our next storyteller is Kevin Griffin, who grew up in Flagstaff, Arizona, and despite being the world's most anxious 13-year-old when she went on her first GCY trip in 2007, she quickly became obsessed with river trips and GCY in general. Like the flow of a meandering river, Kevin's path in life took her all the way to the East Coast for college before gradually pulling her back west via a series of science jobs with the National Park Service and the USGS. See, some of them do grow up to be scientists. These days, Kevin is in the 3rd year of a PhD program at Northern Arizona University, where she uses her degree in geology biology and her big love of desert ecosystems to study biological soil crusts and dryland restoration. And if you don't know what biocrusts are, she's happy to talk to you about them and how they are so cool. Seriously, block off your calendars. Without further ado, Kevin Griffin.
Hello. That's tough to follow, but yeah, I am Kevin, and I want to ask a question for a couple of you in the audience. Raise your hand if you have like wilderness first aid training or wilderness first responder training or like EMT training. Okay, lots of hands, not surprising. But for those of you who do, you'll know that when somebody hits their head, like if someone has a head injury, you suspect they have a concussion, one of the things you're gonna do is you're gonna ask them this like 4-question kind of quiz to assess how alert and oriented they are. Basically like, how badly did you scramble your brain? And the questions get a little bit harder like as you go along. So the first question is, what's your name? Like, who are you? Do you know who you are? And then you're gonna ask them, do you know where you are in space? And then you're gonna ask them, do you know when you are? Like what day it is, what week, what month, what year? And the final question is, can you tell me what happened? Like what happened to you? Why am I asking you these questions? And the day that this story starts, it's in June of 2014. I'm 19 years old, and I'm sitting on a beach in the bottom of Grand Canyon, telling a series of like increasingly concerned looking Grand Canyon Youth River guides that I know the answer to exactly one of those questions. I'm like, my name is Kevin Griffin, and that's all I have for these people. And something that you need to know about me before we go any further is that I hate failing tests. So like a 1 out of 4 terrible grade, and I did not like it. And the last time that I had failed a test that badly was probably like the 5th grade. I failed a test on unit conversion, and it scared me so badly that a couple of months later I got a 99 out of 100 on a geography quiz, and I wept. Not because I was so excited at getting a good grade, but because I was so disappointed at that missing 1%. Like, how could I let this happen? And that tendency towards perfection, that like desire to do everything exactly right, you can imagine that it served me pretty well in high school. Like I had good grades, I was a good student, I got into a good school. And then I got to college, and this force that had propelled me there, this desire to do really well at everything, it kind of became paralytic instead of helpful. Like, I still expected myself to get good grades, but I was so scared of not getting them that I wouldn't take classes that I knew were going to be hard for me. Like, I was interested in science and math, but I wasn't interested in getting B's, and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna stick to what we know. And then in athletics, like I'd always been an athlete and a runner, and I was rowing crew in college, and if I rowed a really fast time at a practice one week, the next week I would get so nervous about not hitting that PR that I would like get physically sick. I would make myself sick, or I would pretend I was injured just so I didn't have to face the possibility of working hard and trying and not being able to do it. I didn't want to fail so badly that I just wouldn't do it. And the worst of it was kind of directed at my body. Like I was like, every pound I gained in college and every blemish on my face and every flaw I perceived in myself, I just would beat myself up over it. It became this source of shame and anxiety and fear. And by the time my freshman year of college ended, I'm 19, I'm coming home for the summer, and I am miserable. I'm exhausted, I'm starving, I'm so stressed out. And the only thing that I was looking forward to, this thing that had gotten me through the long, dark winter of my first year in New England, was this idea that I was coming home to the river. I had plans to be on a river trip with GCY, and I could see it in my mind. I was like, I'm gonna be on a boat, I'm gonna be down there under the sun, and I am going to figure out like what I'm going to do. Because I knew something had to change. Like I could not keep living my life like this, but I didn't know how to do it, I didn't know how to get past it, and I was like, I just have to get back on the river. Like I have always loved it down there, and maybe I'll be able to figure it out. And I remember the first day of this river trip so clearly, right? Like I remember being at Lee's Ferry, I remember where we camped, I remember what we had for dinner, and I remember sitting on a beach and listening to someone play guitar in the distance, this like magical feeling of being on a trip, and the moon coming up, and falling asleep on the beach and thinking like, finally. Like this is something that I'm good at, this is so easy, it's so beautiful, like I'm so happy to be here. And the next thing I do remember, I'm sitting on a beach, and I don't know how I got there. And I'm mid-conversation with a woman that I don't recognize, asking her questions like, who are you? Why does my head hurt? Why does my shoulder hurt? What's going on? And this woman is telling me like, you hit your head, you're going to be okay. And I was like, are you sure? And I didn't know it, but we'd been sitting on that beach for like 4 hours. I had been asking the same 5 questions over and over and over, and nothing was coming in. And we were just waiting for a helicopter to come get me, for me to get better, or for me to get worse, just holding pattern. Now we have 10 years of hindsight, so I can tell you our best guess of what happened that day. As a group, our river trip went up Ryder Canyon. We went on a hike. I've seen pictures, looks gorgeous, beautiful place, never been there. I have, but I don't remember. And on our way back down, like nobody saw me fall, but we think that I was hiking down this ledge and slipped, and basically my head got ahead of my feet, which I don't recommend, and I landed on this shoulder. I hit the ground, I broke my collarbone, I whacked my head, and one of the guides on the trip told me later, she was like, I came around the corner and you were dusting yourself off and you were really eager to reassure me that you were fine. You were like, no, I'm good, it's all cool. And then you paused and you looked at me and you said, I'm so sorry, but am I supposed to know who you are? So they get me down to the beach and they're like, all right, we gotta like check in with GCY, we gotta call in the helicopter, like this kid needs to go. And they're asking me like, what's the last thing you do remember? And basically like we're in June of 2014 and my brain thinks it's March. Like they're asking me about pets we have and I'm like, yeah, our cat. And my younger brother, who luckily was on this trip, was like, that cat, not around and they call the helicopter from the Park Service is like, we can't get to you until tomorrow. It's too windy, like it's not safe for us to fly, like you have to just hang out. And I cannot imagine how scary that must have been for the guides, for the GCY staff, for my parents, who were getting phone calls that were like, hey, come to the hospital, everything's fine. For my younger brother who's sitting there being like, is she good? But for me, like I think it's a testament to how well they were all handling it that I never felt scared or worried. The emotion I felt was, oh my God, how humiliating. Like how embarrassing to have messed this up so badly. Like this is another thing that I couldn't do right. Like this is a thing that I've failed at. And I do remember overnight my memories started coming back and I got woken up every couple of hours so that the guides could check on me as we're waiting for this helicopter. And I remember the first time I could remember one of the guides' names. He was like, do you know who I am? And I was like, yeah, you're Tony. And he was stoked. He was so happy. And I remember getting on the helicopter the next morning. I remember the pilot making a joke of like, I hope you remember the view. And I do. I do remember it. It was gorgeous. And I remember getting to the ambulance. I remember getting to the ER. I remember Chantal's face. I remember my parents' face, trying really hard to seem nonchalant. And I remember like shooting them a double thumbs up as I'm sitting in my hospital bed. I think there's a photo of that one. And then, all of a sudden the doctor's saying like, hey, you're gonna be okay. Take it easy. You're really lucky. Like this could have been worse. This is really scary, but it could have been worse. And I'm suddenly home and I have this big realization, right? Like this is an opportunity to start over. This is a big moment in your life. This is a moment of literal impact as well as metaphorical impact, right? Like this is a hard reset. This is your chance to kind of think about things. And, I think all of you here are like, well, why are you telling us this? And you've heard that now, like, I'm a scientist. I'm in this career where failure is sort of part of the deal. Like, we ask questions we don't know the answer to, and I go places that are a little bit nerve-wracking, and I do work that's really hard, and it's really challenging, and you guys, I have no idea what's going on, like, a lot of the time. Like, it's really hard, there are no answers, that's the whole job I've signed up for, and I am able to do that because at this moment in my life, I told myself, like, here's your choice. You can keep living your life defined by the things that scare you. You can not try, you can run away from the things that you failed at, but if you choose to do that, you can never go back on the river. Like if you want to run away from the things that you think of as mistakes, then that means you can't go back. And I was like, I cannot do that. I cannot give up this life on the river and who I think I could be if I just pushed a little bit harder and did a couple of things that scared me. And so that's why I'm here. That's why I've been able to do the things that I've been able to do. I trace it all back to that moment, that big moment in my life that has led to 10 years of much smaller moments that brought me to where I am today. So because of all of that, I'm able to stand in front of you and say, my name is Kevin Griffin. I'm in Flagstaff, Arizona. It's November of 2024, and I am not perfect, but I am the happiest that I have ever been. Thank you.
Yeah, when Kevin said that, she's like, I have a story of impact, and I was like, are you gonna tell that story? And I had this moment of like, wait a minute, and then as she started telling me a little bit more about it, I was like, you know what? It's also sort of an allegory for life. Like, you can't control all of the things that are gonna happen. And I'm just so grateful that you were so courageous to share that story with us tonight. Thanks so much. And God, getting through the stories without crying is really hard for me, you know this. Before we take a quick intermission, I want to give you a little update about what's going on at Grand Canyon Youth. It's been a really wonderful year, 2024. There we go. And we are at a really good place as an organization and doing some great things. We have an amazing team of folks. And if you like numbers, here's some stats. We ran 65 expeditions and served 874 youth and got youth outside for 3,915 days. And we're hoping to sustain that number for the next few years because that's been a big lift to get us there and to sustain it, and we're excited to keep doing that. And some highlights from this year. This is like the alumni stories just like bring me so much joy. We have an alumni who's down in Tucson and working with the 4-H program there and is working, got a grant with the, it's called the Military Teen Camp Adventure, or MTAC for short. And they got this grant and they did 3 expeditions with Grand Canyon Youth with kids of military families from across the country. And it was just so cool to see her kind of bring back some other youth and participate in that way. And we got our first 2 vans, which was kind of exciting. Pretty cool. And some more boats, and provided over $110,000 in financial aid. If you don't know how GCY works, we try and keep the cost as affordable as possible, especially in Flagstaff. Anyway, keep it affordable as possible. But then if you need additional support, that's financial aid. And so that's over $110,000 just this year. And then we collaborate with so many different organizations and groups. And just this year, 33 different groups, including a lot from here in Flagstaff. And I wanted to kind of ground us in what we do at GCY and some of the ways that we're trying to bring intention to bringing youth to the river. And back when Kevin started with us and Emily and Mark started with us, we had a few trips, a couple in Green Canyon and then the San Juan. And what we realized is that there were some families that were like, we are really nervous sending our kids on a 16-day full-length Grand Canyon trip in Green Canyon. So we wanted to find a good day trip. And so the photo there, they actually account for the most of our expeditions are actually Verdes now. We serve every 5th grader at 4 Title I schools here in Flagstaff, and it's such a great opportunity for them to literally dip their toe in the water. And we do the little Toosie section right by Clarkdale, and it's so awesome. The youth paddle their own kayaks, anyway, it's really great to see a kid in a kayak. And some kids, it comes really naturally. Others just sit there, and the water just takes them. It's been really interesting to see then how the group comes together, that kind of thing. So, yay, Verde trips. As I mentioned, we run the San Juan River. It is the only permit that Grand Canyon Youth actually owns, if you own a permit, but yeah, it's our only permit. And we love the San Juan. It's a great place to kind of take it to that next step. And we run trips from 3 days in length to 7 days in length, but really kind of standard 4-day. And we get to have inflatable kayaks out there. We work with a lot of the middle schools here in Flagstaff. And it's just an amazing introductory experience for these young people. Then, if you take it to the next level, we do our Diamond Creek to Pierce Ferry, Diamond Down as it's known, and do a few expeditions there each year. And it's an interesting section of the canyon because the river hits the reservoir and it just really starts changing. And so there's so many incredible learning opportunities about tribal lands that they're traveling through, about the impacts of both climate change and of dams. And so it's a really interesting place. Youth participate in every aspect of our trips, cooking, having fun. I like the table, seems pretty high there. And then we are really grateful to be the only nonprofit organization that runs youth-based expeditions in Grand Canyon, nonprofit. And we are so grateful for our collaborators with the USGS and Grand Canyon National Park. We have agreements with both of those agencies. And then we also work with commercial outfitters. And it's feel really grateful for that access and the ability to share this place with young people. And a river trip, everybody thinks of Grand Canyon, the Colorado River through Grand Canyon is like big rapids and cool hikes. I think one of the biggest impacts that I've seen is actually the community that is built. The friendship bracelets are such a great symbol of that. There are youth who've come back who have stayed in touch for 20 years since their trip. And so it really is an excellent way to build community. And then in this year, we were able to collaborate with 2 all Indigenous youth programs, and they're intertribal. And wow, I learn a lot on, and I have not been on one of these expeditions, but I learn a lot about the space of Grand Canyon, and it's been a lot of recreational space. We've heard a little bit about it as a scientific space, but it is also very much a cultural space, and learning a lot from these youth and their leaders about how important it is for youth to be able to visit and experience this place. So where are we going? Dun, 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 dun. So at GCY right now, we're joking that we are already in 2025 because we started planning for 2025 in August. And so we are planning 2025. We've got most of our schedule already put together. And then our individual expeditions are opening very soon. The dates are on our website, so if you want to start planning or sign up, you can go, and once they are open, we will send you an email, and we'd love for you to participate. We have trips in Mainstorm Grand Canyon and then our middle school adventure programs as well. And it was so cool tonight. Somebody that was here came up and was like, I did the middle school adventure trip 10 years ago. So I forgot that was a GCY trip. It was very great. And then, like I mentioned a little bit before, we are at Grand Canyon Youth wanting to sustain. One of the things that is in concert with our values is we don't want to be extractive of the place, and so we feel like we've reached a really great number of expeditions so that we really feel like we can meet our mission, but we're not trying to do too much. So we can really focus on quality. And then we've been doing a lot of work over the last few years to try and better understand the impact. I've been here for a couple of years, and so I get to, see Kevin or run into alumni that are doing incredible things around town. And so I know anecdotally the impact that these programs have, and yet I want to understand it more because that way we can maybe help our design of our expeditions be even better so that we can continue to just deepen the impact and understand a little bit about how place combined with community, combined with your individual experience, can just make the biggest impact for young people. So that's what's going on at GCY. It's pretty cool. Pretty happy to be there. I know, talk about rough act to follow, like talk about GCY stuff after those two amazing stories. We are gonna take a short intermission, and during the intermission, you can use the restrooms. I'll do my restrooms. Grab some more food and drinks. We'll start after the intermission, start kind of shutting down the food part of the evening, and so if you're still hungry, get some great Fratelli's pizza or dessert. And then you check out some of our auction items in the lobby. You can buy merch if you don't yet have an Alumni Sun hoodie. That is the Alumni Fund, all run by alumni, which is pretty cool. And reminder, our auction is online. If you haven't looked at it yet, I highly recommend it. Again, nearly 200 items, very cool. And you can find that on our website, gcuyouth.org, and it will take you right there. And if you are already part of the auction, check your auction items. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And we have 3 more stories after the intermission, and you will not want to miss them. And so I hope to see you back here in 15 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back. I just checked in on our fundraising goal, and y'all, we are over our goal. So. So thank you, each and every one of you who have contributed, which you have, because you're here. So thanks so much. As I mentioned before the intermission, we have 3 stories. And the first story is actually via video. The person telling the story wasn't able to be here, but I'm going to introduce them anyway. This is Maddie Friend, and Maddie Friend has been a part of the GCY universe since 2009 as a participant, and then our AmeriCorps intern, driver, trip coordinator, JEDI Council member, which is our Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Council, guide, and anything else she can participate in with GCY. Though she now lives in the rainy Pacific Northwest, she never misses a moment to relish in the beauty of water in the desert.
My name is Maddie Friend, and I am calling in today from Tacoma, Washington, the ancestral homelands of the Puyallup people. Though I am away in the rainy Pacific Northwest, I grew up in Flagstaff, Arizona, and spent my time in the Grand Canyon, frolicking in the desert on the ancestral lands of 11 associated tribes there. I have been part of Grand Canyon Youth since 2009, first as a participant on the San Juan River and then in Grand Canyon, and that really sparked my curiosity and joy for science and rivers and set me on an incredible life path since GCY, from being an AmeriCorps member, working in the office, a volunteer, a driver, a JEDI Council member, and now a guide, which I continue to do even though I'm no longer a full-time river runner. And as part of this, as you know, we guides, we love to tell stories. But one thing about me is that I actually usually try to shy away from the campfire. I'm much more of a written storyteller. I love to write and have taken part in GCY's different campaigns. But today, I'm going to step out of my comfort zone, challenge by choice, if you will, and tell you a little bit of a story of one of the best river trips I've had in my entire life. So, to set the scene, it's on a GCY trip. GCY trips are fun. They are awesome. We do science, we play games, we wear costumes, a lot of things that happen on other river trips you might have worked on, but these ones are special because the youth are at the center and they're the whole heart of it. And now, just this past May, a group of girls from Austin, Texas, the Girls School of Austin, came down with their teacher, Coach Sparks, and we were ready to have a great time. There was only 8 girls. And they drove into Diamond Down, and already you could feel their excitement. You can sometimes just know when a group's gonna be awesome. They had palpable energy, they were ready in their river shirts, they were excited to drink water and play sunscreen, and had a great time learning. And it was especially cool because this group was all one school. It was their entire class. There were about 8 8th graders, and they had been together as a unit moving through. And this was their capstone trip after working so hard to finish all of their projects, bond together, really take time to learn about the canyon and all of its glory. And so we set off on the first day. You know, I'm on the paddle boat, one of my favorites, and it gives them a bit of a paddle talk, paddle prep, everyone's trying. We get into the eddy, we cruise around, and we're crushing it. Everyone's doing great, flat water, we're moving together forward. I've got about 6 on my boat. We do our first day, you know, going from Diamond Down, and they do amazing. We go through our first few rapids and riffles. They're in unison, they're paddling together. Even the teeny tiny little ones, they're digging their blades all the way into the water, holding on to T-grips, everything a good paddle captain could want, cheering on each other, having the best time. So we get to our first camp, we have a great day, we're teaching them science, they set up in an amphitheater, they're exploring, just one of the best, most fun, enjoyable groups we ever had, and we have a great night. We wake up the next morning and it's time for rapids. Now, if you've been on Diamond Down, you know that there's a really fun day of rapids lined up all the way through the 230s. And their teacher had been on this trip before. And previously they had a bigger group, so not everyone could fit all on one boat. But we were super lucky that I got all 8 of them, even the ones who were a little nervous but wanted to step into a challenge, to come onto the paddle boat. And so we go through 8 girls all working together, having an amazing time, crushing the paddle boats, going through 231, 232, 234, everything, having a great time. And it was one of the most seamless, perfect, great days on the boats I had ever had. But that's not actually what I'm here to tell you a story about. You know, we have great times on the white water, we love rapids, we love getting wet, and we'll show a video of some of that. But that's not actually where most of the magic happened for me. You know, it was an incredibly special trip to be with girls and women and non-binary people. And our fearless trip leader, you may know him, Cliff Kilieri, was the one man on the trip. And he kept saying, you know, he felt a little bad that we couldn't have a female trip leader. But of course we were thrilled to have him because he's a wonderful person to be boating with and to have driving a snout. And that's where these girls really shined. They learned how to drive the motor. Some of them took it on consistently. We had great talks about the geography, the earth sciences, the tribes, what really makes this place special. They were so engaged, so interested, and really wanted to take a part of it. But the highlight of this whole trip, we had great times in the rapids, we had beautiful hikes, they made amazing art, we did cool science, all the things of a GCY trip, was our very last day. We camped at, you know, some random little ledges outside of the Lake Mead layer, if you will, and they were so efficient, we got everything done packed. So we were in there last morning, we're raiding, we're just hanging out, and Cliff busts out his guitar and starts to sing. And the girls are having a great time, we're loving, we're hanging this out. And now, one thing that you might not know about me and middle school girls, we are huge Taylor Swift fans. And so we've been singing all night, and then all of a sudden, Cliff, on his guitar, goes into some Taylor Swift. We break it out, we're all singing, we're shaking it off, and we are having the very best time on the waterfront. And that memory will be something that I will hold on to forever. And I am so proud to be a GCY guide and a GCY alum. I thank you for taking the time to come listen to our stories today, and I want to hear some of your own. I love to hear, you know, how the program has transformed and worked with people, and my ear is always open. I love to talk to fellow alum, fellow guides, fellow participants, donors, anyone who's part of the GCY family. So to that I say thank you, and yay science.
I'm going to tell a funny, sorry, that was loud. I'm going to tell a funny story. So the teacher, Coach Sparks, called the office on April 1st and was like, hey, will you help me with an April Fool's joke for my class that's going on your trip? And I was like, what is it? And she's like, I want you to tell them that they have to do a swim test before they go. And I was like, okay. So I get on a Zoom. It was so awesome. She's like, okay. I'm like, okay, so show me how you swim. And so they're all just swimming in the class. It was awesome. Anyway, pretty cool teacher. And so they're like, swimming along, and then they're like, wait a second. Want to take a couple quick seconds to thank some other folks who have made some donations here to help make this event such a success. We have Four Seasons Guides, Beyond the Pines Counseling, Mountain View Pediatrics, and our event Underwater Arizona Raft Adventures. So, yay!
Marvin Institute, Arch, Mo, Flags of the Dogs.
Amazing. And all donations go toward making the river expeditions available and affordable for youth. And young people make this organization what it is. I'm excited. I was just talking to Anya, our next storyteller, and I was like, oh my gosh, you've been with GCY for a minute. You were in that video from 2014. So if you don't know Anya, you are in for a treat. Anya Metcalf is an ecologist with the USGS Grand Canyon Monitoring and Research Center, proud to sometimes be called Bug Lady. Anya has had the pleasure of joining several GCY trips in Grand Canyon and on the San Juan to look for bugs, capture fish, record bat activity, and share the joy that can come with observation and scientific discovery. Anya is part of the Partners in Science team that equips GCY trips with community science projects each year and has worked with the citizen science data collected by GCY and the Grand Canyon River running community since 2012. Her story is titled Spinning Silken Yarns, Unraveling the Mysteries of the Fingernet Caddisflies with GCY.
Thanks, Emma. Hi, my name is Anya. I'm a very proud bug lady. And I have the privilege of being a researcher in Grand Canyon. And I've had the opportunity to go down the river on science trips, on commercial trips, private trips, and the most important ones, which are GCY trips and Partners in Science. From the scientists' perspective, they're just like the best because there's usually only 2 or 3 of us, and on regular science trips, we've got these like packed itineraries, a lot of sample collection. On GCY trips, it just feels like there's time to really be in the canyon and connect and observe and take advantage of these sweet youths and use them as field assistants to do whatever you want. So piss, Partners in Science is the best. And yeah, all of that time and all of those natural history observations are key to coming back to Flagstaff with good questions, which are the foundation of good science, right? So I will start with a question for you all, which is show of hands, who knows what a caddisfly is? Yes! Okay, I'm gonna say that was like about 50%, maybe a little bit more, and that makes me really happy, but I'm still gonna talk about caddisflies, because that's what I do when I'm nervous. So caddisflies are like if you gave butterflies and moths aquatic superpowers. So just like butterflies and moths, they're holometabolists. They have 4 life stages, egg, larva, pupa, adult. And they spend those first 3 life stages underwater. And the 4th life stage, adults, they actually emerge from the water and fly around. They look like little moths, but unlike butterflies and moths, they have little hairs instead of scales on their wings. And like butterflies and moths, they have silk. And again, superpowers, they use this silk not just to spin their homes, they would make these little tubes using their silk and rocks and sticks and whatever's available to them on the river bottom to protect themselves from predators. And they'll also use these silks to weave nets and to use them as tools. They deploy them to catch food that's drifting by in the current. And some of the coolest caddisflies that I've ever come across our National Canyon. So of course, they're a National Canyon, because if you've ever been there, you know that it's a really special place. It's on the Hualapai Nation. It pretty much marks the start of it on River Left, mile 166, and going all the way down to 274. And it's in the Muav limestone and dolomite, so it's just like this sparkling, white, smooth limestone when it gets carved out in these side canyons, so it's just magical. I always think of that one Serena Suplee painting. I feel like Flagstaff, I can call out a single painting, a lot of you will know it, but it's, national, again, cool canyon, used to be this really popular campsite, huge, huge beach. Serena Suplee, saved this moment in time where you're looking up at the skyline and there's just the outline of a raven full of constellations. That's what camping there is like. Yeah, it used to be a great camp. This huge flash flood ripped it out. It's a really dynamic, magical tributary that just, I'm going into all these details because it just feels special. So of course there would be this really special caddis fly that I'm completely obsessed with in it. And yeah, the first time that I ever saw Philippotamid, a net spinning caddisfly, was on a science trip in April of 2017. And I was confused because I was just walking around in the canyon and I saw what looked like this ghostly veil, kind of like, it looked like it should be floating down that little trickle of water that's in the back of National, but it was staying in place. It was kind of ghostly. And it was just like entrancing and this like weird little dancer, and I watched it for a long time before grabbing it and destroying it, because these are my tendencies, and seeing what was in it, and this like floating, levitating, magical net in my hand. I pulled it out and it was exposed to gravity and just looked like slime on my hand, and I kept digging around in it, and in the back of this net, sure enough, was this tiny caddisfly larva. I was like, yes, cool. I think this caddisfly might have made that net. Maybe went a little over destructo and found a few more nets and confirmed that observation, and was able to find more of these caddisfly larvae in the back of this net. And grabbed a couple of them in a vial, brought them back to the lab, and a week later in Flagstaff, it was my first time seeing those larvae and learning about these fingernet caddisflies, the Philippotammids. And I have not found any pictures or talked to any trichopterologists. Trichoptera is the order of caddisflies, hairy wings. And these Philippotammids in National, they're special. Their nets are really long. It might be just the conditions that the current there is so gentle, but some of them are like as long as like almost a foot. They're really, really long. They're funnel shaped. They've got this big opening and they pinch off in the back. And yeah, it's just like this crazy example again, right, of caddisflies as like doing this architecture. They're building these nets that slow down the velocity in the stream. They're completely changing their environment. And I went back and I found them again on April trips in 2018 and 2019. I kept being a mean human, poking around in some of the nets, and found other bugs living in them. I even found a helpermite in there once that it was eating them. So yeah, a long obsession with these. And so yeah, saw them April 2017, 18, 19. And then 2020 rolled around, and I didn't get to go in the canyon that year. A lot of people didn't get to go in the canyon that year because 2020 pandemic. It's also the year I became a mom, so didn't get back into the canyon for a while. I never stopped thinking about these Philippotammids. Like, what are they doing in there? Why are their nets so long? They just seem special. They've got to be a subspecies. And April of 2022, same science trip, got to get back in there, and it's like nothing to do directly with the kind of science that we're doing on that trip. And I'm like, oh, I hope we have time to stop at National. I really want to see my caddis friends. And as happens on science trips, there's a lot to do, and we had to pass it, and I was crushed. I was so sad. I was like, no, like I haven't seen them. I don't know if they're there. There's been floods. Things have changed. Where did they go? And I'm like continuing this obsession. Lucky for me, there was room on a Partners in Science trip that same year in June, and immediately I was like, oh, we're stopping at National this trip, because I really, really wanted to see how my friends are doing. And yeah, there was just actually time for it, and it was a really special trip. It was my first post-COVID trip, and some of those trips now have youth staying on without any passenger exchange. So we had the same group of kids for 2 weeks, just full commit, everyone to know each other so well, everyone being their full weird selves. So just really wonderful, wonderful trip. And I was just like foaming in the mouth the whole time. If you've ever talked to me for like more than an hour, we've probably talked about caddis flies. And yeah, I'm doing this the whole trip. I'm like getting, you know, I don't have a boat, so I'm like going boat to boat day by day and just telling the exact same stories about caddis flies over and over again, getting everyone hyped for National. And the day finally came, we got to National, we were not skipping it that trip. And it was hot, it was June, and you know, it's not a long beach, but it's not a sandy one anymore either, and like, you know, everyone's like exhausted by this heat, and it's not a huge walk, but as you approach National in the June heat, it feels like a long walk, and that gravel is like crunching under our feet, and the walls are beautiful, they're glittering, but that shade is like so far away, and we get to the canyon walls, and like, you know, we're getting closer and closer to the shade, we hit the shade, and we hit where I've always seen water in April, and it's not there. And I'm like, okay, stay cool. This is fun, science is fun. I really like, earlier, Kevin, you said that like science is full of just like, you know, questions that you don't know the answers to, and disappointment. So much disappointment. And I was just like, you know, trying to, you know, keep up the cheer, like the hope. All right, there's gonna be water. There's always water in National, right? And we keep going, and some of that hypereic flow, the water that's underneath the gravel, starts to pop up here and there, and I'm like, okay, it might be there. And then there was also this like thick mat of lime green Clitophora covering the creek, and I was like, okay, well, maybe we just can't see the nets because they're mixed in with the Clitophora, or how are these caddis potentially using the Clitophora for shelter? Are they under it? You know, and everyone like wants to play and enjoy this magical place, and I'm like, okay, I need 5 students. We're gonna systematically go through this Clitophora. We're gonna find these caddis flies, and I'm just like, you know, charging off, like, yeah, just kind of obsessing, and we dig, and we're looking, and June, there's like often kind of a lull in larval life, and I'll get to why. And we're just like not finding a lot of bugs, and I'm sad. And I'm keeping me on track. Okay, Beck, our TL, pulled everyone aside for a moment of appreciation for our surroundings. And I needed that. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that it was okay to not find the cool caddisfly, that, you know, it's still data, it's still an important observation. We had learned that they're not there in June, and, you know, that it was okay. And Beck, yeah, led us all in a moment of silence and gratitude, and then kind of brought us back into ourselves, our bodies, our surroundings, and shared an excerpt from Braiding Sweetgrass, which, if you haven't read, is an awesome book. That does a good job bringing together indigenous knowledge and Western sciences, and really just does a good job comparing, contrasting, and celebrating both traditional ecological knowledge and the scientific method. And I don't know exactly what excerpt we read, so here's one I picked for sharing today. Some people say that time is a river into which we can step, but once as it flows in a straight path to the sea. Nanabojo's people know that time is a circle. Time is not a river running inexorably to the sea, but the sea itself, its tides that appear and disappear, the fog that rises to become rain in a different river. All things that were will come again. The moment of silence helped me reset and look at where I was and who I was with. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the caddisfly obsessing to the best of my ability, and joined the crew in celebrating and exploring the canyon and its winding white narrows. This is actually from that day. We braided the long clitopera into our hair, and it felt so good to be cold on that hot June day, and just enjoy the deep shade of being in National, and really just appreciated the place. And I was like, okay, I've learned something. It's fine. Kind of came to peace with it. And as we were walking back to the boats, I was running my hands along the wall and saw a huge spider web. And as you do when you see a spider web, I was like, okay, what's in the spider web? And I looked at it, and it was covered with caddisflies. They had emerged, and it wasn't just any caddisflies. They were these little tiny black ones, and I mostly look at adult caddisflies, so I knew on sight that they were Camara ridleyi, which is the only species of Philopotamidae that we have records of from the main stem, and was the most likely species level ID for the larvae that we had found in the other years, but you can't identify larvae to species level, you need an adult. So in these spider webs, the spiders had saved some adult caddisflies, by the dozens, and that was the answer. They were in the creek because they had emerged, and they were pretty fresh. They were crispy from the heat, but they were pretty fresh, so the emergence was right around there in June, and got it all, it was the best. So these caddisflies, they've got this complex life cycle, and adulthood's really brief for them. They don't have feeding mouth parts as adults. They spend about a year growing up egg, larva, pupa in the water, and when they're out as adults, it's just business, mating, lay eggs, and die, which is really different from our human experience, where we just got this sweet, small chunk of being larvae, most of us. And that's why river trips are, with GCY, are the most impactful, is really celebrating that life stage. Okay, I'm out of time, but I'm going to read one more Braiding Sweetgrass quote, which is, knowing that you love the earth changes you, activates you to defend and protect and celebrate. But when you feel that the earth loves you in return, that feeling transforms the relationship from a one-way street into a sacred bond.
Did you know you were going to learn tonight? You did. You learned. Well, I learned, I should say. Tonight we've heard so many stories inspired by impact, and we hope that you are continuing to reflect on the impact the river and the time outdoors has had on you. We have one more story this evening, and thanks again so much for sticking around and hearing these great stories and these wonderful storytellers. I've never gotten to do a river trip with you. That's what I'm just realizing. Sorry, bring it back. Okay, our last story of this evening is Stephen Yazzie. And Stephen Yazzie did his first GCY trip in the early 2000s. We have some debates about which one it was, but it is in the early 2000s. And then he was on the Native American Youth Art Trip with me, actually, a long time ago. I think his daughter is the same age that he was when he went on his first trip. And with the artist Bahi Whitethorn, who was a wonderful part of the Grand Canyon community for a long time. After going on a number of GCY trips as a youth, he then went to college and became the PRM Parks and Rec Management Intern at GCY, and then became a river guide for GCY. And he has continued to guide with us on and off since. Going full circle, this past summer, he guided a 9-day Ancestral Lands All Indigenous expedition with GCY in Grand Canyon. He got a bachelor's in fine art from NAU with an emphasis in jewelry making and metalsmithing, and went on to get a dual degree in Parks and Recreation with an emphasis in outdoor leadership and a minor in eco-psychology. And I think if when your daughter goes on a GCY trip, it will be the first daughter of an alumni to participate. You can find Stephen's amazing jewelry at the Artist Gallery in Flagstaff. And in addition to working full-time for Mountain Lion, he thinks of himself as a part-time artist, river guide, and good friend to everyone. Stephen.
Hello, how's everyone doing? Still sticking in there. Great. Yeah, Steve Niazi Nishia, Kia Ani Nishia, Todichi, Pashichin, Tanasani Tashichi, Tapaha, Tashinella, out ego Denehastin. Hello, my name is Stephen Yazzie. My first clan is Towering House. My second clan is Bitterwater. My third clan is Tanglehead People. And my fourth clan is Edgewater. Our pronouns are he, him. So, impact, yes. For when I was first thinking about talking about impact, I had to first define it. I had to go figure out what the definition of impact was. It seems easy enough to think about what it was and how we kind of define it, impactful moments, but I really, really want to know. But before I even got there, I had to go and, well, define myself. We're gonna get deep, y'all. So, I asked a really good friend here and there, how would they define me? Because I always feel that other people can define you and you would really know who you might be. So I asked a childhood friend of mine, Zachary Cohen, couldn't make it tonight, but he defined me in two different ways. He said, one, well, he's my best friend, so obviously he'd be like, you're an ass. But he said that, well, for one, you're an outdoorsman. You like to be outside. That's your happy place. It's a place where you can kind of just be free and be yourself. And he says, and when you're free and when you're yourself, you're also an artist. You express yourself through your art and what you want to say. You don't just say it by saying it, but you say it with your drawings, with your artwork, with your jewelry. You extend out how you feel about someone by making them things. So he said that an outdoorsman, an artist. I was like, all right, check, define me. Now let's go check out to see how we can go define impact. So like anyone nowadays, I looked at my phone. I found many different definitions there. I went online on my computer, I went to go check, found many definitions there, but they just weren't really hitting anywhere specific. So I went to my parents' place a couple weeks ago, and for some of you young kids, this is kind of crazy. There's this thing that has pages in it, and it's wrapped around. There's words in there. It's called a book. So, and this book specifically was an old Webster's dictionary that was borrowed and never returned when I was in high school. And this thing was old, like you can even read the front page of it, and I think part of it's like falling apart. But it had this really good definition that really just resonated with me. And I really liked it. I tried to memorize it the best I could. And if I'm trying to remember it, it said, a significant, small enough, or large enough force to forever change a state of mind, a physicality, or trajectory of an object of the two previous. So I really liked that. And I was like, oh wow, that's really good. And I just kept thinking about that definition for a while because there was one word in that I, for some reason, kept on thinking about. And the word was change. It forever changes. The impact so small or so significant to forever change how something once was, whether it be physically or a state of mind to think about it. So I was thinking about, so I was looking at all the definitions, and that word kept popping up in different ways, was change. So, check, defined impact. So once I defined myself and defined impact of where I thought was really good, I wanted to think how those things come together to define a moment in time, a story that I could tell here tonight that could do that for me. And as Emma said, I've been part of GCY for a while. I did some trips back in the day. I did 6 trips with Grand Canyon Youth as a youth, and I went on a Native American Arts Road trip with the late Bahi Whitethorn Sr. And the story I'm going to tell you was the 3rd year in. So at this time, we knew each other really well. And it was kind of funny because he was like, "You're back again?" I'm like, "Yeah, I love this trip." So, nice thing about it though was it was on the 3rd day. We were having a lot of fun. I think we were either at Cottonwood Camp or Chinle Camp. I just remember it was one of those two. And he said, "Stephen, you pretty much know what I'm going to say because you've done these 2 trips before. Why don't you just hang back right here? Me and you, we're going to go walk up this little area. We're going to sit right there. We're going to do some one-on-one. We're going to do some artwork." And I'm like, "Yeah." So I was really excited. So I'm going to get these guys started on what they need to do, just the intro stuff. You already know these things, so just get your stuff together, just chill out, and then, in 20 minutes we're going to go. Time went by, and he's like, "You ready?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm ready." So he went ahead, picked me up by my head, we marched up a little bit of a ways, and we sat down, and we just sat there for a while. And I was like, "All right, well, I'm going to get my sketchbook out and start drawing." So I start drawing, kind of just keep going, kind of doing doodles and whatnot, and then I look back at him, and he's just, sitting there, kind of just on a rock. And I'm just like, "Dude, I thought you could do some one-on-one with me." And he said, "Yeah, I am." He said, "But I'm trying to teach you a lesson real quick." I was like, "Well, what are you trying to teach me?" He said, "I'm trying to teach you the essence of to sit and listen." I was like, "Well, what does that have to do with drawing?" He said, "It has to do everything with artwork, especially since we're out here doing watercolor, especially since the greatest artist is nature, and we're just taking a little piece of that. We're taking a little piece of that, and we're just trying to copy it just a little bit and put it on paper." And I was like, "Okay." And I was like, he said, "So just sit there and don't do anything." I was like, "All right." So I sit there, fiddle with my thumbs, kind of just. So some time goes by, and then he notices me. He's like, you're not doing it." I was like, "What do you mean? I'm sitting here and I'm listening." He's like, No. You're sitting, but you're not listening." I was like, "Well, how do you do it?" He says, "That's a good question." He's like, "Look at this painting that's already done that I have right here." I was like, "All right." He said, what can you see?" And I was like, "Well, I can kind of see that there's wind. I can see it's sunny. I can see some birds in there. And I think I see like a squirrel or a lizard, something." He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "So let's just look at this. Let's look at everything that's on there. Let's look at the sky. Let's look at the wind. Have you closed your eyes and just listened to the river below? How do you capture that and put that in a painting?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know." He's like, "You're right, because you're moving around, okay, all this noise, and you're just being noisy. You gotta shut up and listen." Yeah, he said, "Shut up," and I was like, but he's like, "You gotta sit down and listen. That's the only way you're gonna be able to take what nature is trying to teach you." And he was telling me that through our indigenous view, a Navajo view of it all, is that we are a part of nature. That we ourselves took ourselves out of nature. And that was what was unnatural. He's like, "You've been so far away from it, it's hard for you to tune into it." He's like, "But when you sit and listen, and you're actually part of nature, and you don't do anything, you can harmoniate with it. And then from that, you can get inspired as an artist, or an outdoorsman, or anyone creative, or a scientist, or 2 lovers on a boat that fall out in lava." Someone who was looking for caddisflies, finally found it. Someone who bonked their head, but eventually found out who they were. It says, when you can harmony with nature, you can really feel still. It says, so let's try it one more time. Let's sit here for about 10 minutes. Not one word exchange. Don't move, don't draw, just take it all in. I want you to notice everything, the skyline, the wind. Close your eyes every now and then. Take a big whiff of the air. What do you smell? What do you hear? How can you exemplify that in your drawing? It doesn't have to be perfect, just take it in. So we did that for 10 minutes. We sat there and we listened. So as time went by, I noticed all these great little small things like the ants, the feeling of the sand, how greasy my hair felt. The river, it almost felt like nature was talking. It was talking to me. Not that it was saying anything specific, but I could hear some sort of rhythm that was there. And I knew what he meant by that. And he said that when I try to capture that in those watercolors that I do, I just try to capture that harmonization that we all see. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it hits in different ways, but that's all I'm trying to do. And you can only get that if you sit and listen. So about 8 minutes in, I was in the groove, man. I was like in it. I was like, yeah, I'm part of nature. I'm just taking this all in. And then over my head, on my sketch pad, lands a canyon wren on my sketch pad. And I was like that. And I was kind of like I want to be like, oh, but like at the same time, I'm not reacting because I'm just part of nature. So I'm just in it. The bird looks at me, looks at Bahi, takes him. And Bahi's like, I looked at him, he's like, now we're ready. So we stayed there for about an hour, or 30 minutes or something like that. It felt like an hour. He showed me some wet on wet, dry techniques. He showed me how to do pen on ink paper. He showed me how to do his little birds he did. He told me the story about his chairs. And while I was there, I went ahead and did this one painting that I labeled Sit and Listen. If you go to the artist gallery, I have little postcards of that painting that I scanned. It has a single chair sitting on a dune on a hill, and I labeled it Sit and Listen. That moment itself was so impactful to me as an individual, as an artist, as an outdoorsman, as a pupil learning from a mentor, to take things in, to sometimes not react as you would want to, but maybe just to sit and listen. In today's age, I think sometimes we forget about that. And I think it's a good thing that we go ahead and take a step back and we just sit and listen. We harmonize back with nature. So some time goes by, years and years and years, and last year I got to see him. That was one of the last times I saw him. He was at the Museum of Northern Arizona. They're having a indigenous art fair. My dad was part of that fair, and I went over there to go see all the artists there, and he was sitting there in his little tent booth. And he was a bit older. He was kind of sitting down in his chair, just kind of sitting, not doing anything. And I sat right by him. We introduced each other, and he was really happy to see me, just a big old smile on his face, like he was just so happy. I was telling him all the great things I'm doing. He himself was kind of like tearing up. He's like, I'm so glad that you took in what all these great things that you were telling me and the stuff I taught you. I was like, yeah, man, it was really good. Thank you for it all. It changed my life. And I was just sitting there for a minute because he was sitting down. He was just, same thing, just taking it all in, sitting and listening. He was looking at the peaks. I remember his face. It was just, he was looking at the peaks. And then there was a sketchbook, or like a blank piece of paper. And he kept on looking, closing his eyes and looking. And I was like, looking at him, I was like, you're painting right now, aren't aren't you? He's like, yep. He's like, I'm just painting right now in my head. I'm closing my eyes and taking it all in. That was the last time I saw him. So, I guess if I were to say, and leave a notion to everyone, is when you have a chance, when you go out in nature, do your art, do whatever the things that you do, go for your hikes, go fishing, go hunting. When you're outdoors, take 10 minutes, sit, and listen. My name is Stephen Yazzie. Thank you.
He would be really proud of you, I'm sure. Yeah, good tricks. Thank all of you so much for sticking around. And we want, oh, there we go. Ta-da! I'm not even gonna talk, I just wanna end with just a lot of gratitude. One of the things that always surprises me about this event is you have one theme, impact. And we had 5 stories that were so different and yet complemented each other so well. And just in this like beautiful, spontaneous way. It was amazing. Love it. And also just such gratitude for this community, for supporting organizations like Grand Canyon Youth, and for the impacts that this organization has that has had over the 26 years that we've been around. It's pretty remarkable. We want to thank our sponsors, and then we're going to call all the storytellers up here again so we can thank them and give them a big round of applause, and we have a gift for them. So if you would come back up, it would be really great. For next year, but you can email me at emma@gcyouth.org or come talk to me after. But really appreciate everyone stepping out of their comfort zones and coming and sharing a story tonight. A special shout out to Urian, also a GCY alumni on sound. And Newton for his technical skills, video. There will be a recording of these stories that will go up in just a few weeks probably. And I want to give a huge thank you to all of the incredible GCY staff. They're not all in here, but I want them to feel the love, so let's. We also have a number of board members here tonight, current and former, so yay for our board members. And some incredible field staff and volunteers who helped to serve pizza and set up and all of those kinds of things. All right, and then thank you all so much for bidding on the auction. Again, the auction will be closing tomorrow, Sunday at noon. And if you are the winner of an item, you'll get an email and a text message, and you can pick up your winnings starting on Monday. Please give us till 9 a.m. There have been people there at like 8 already. So 9 a.m. And then a huge thank you to all of our generous and talented supporters who donated items to be in the auction. And then one just last shout out to each and every one of you who joined us tonight. Community is that energy that happens between the folks up here and you in the audience. So thank you so very much. And we hope that you had a wonderful evening, and we hope to see you next year. Have a lovely evening. Thank you.